Hello and welcome back to The Wargamer. In this video I'll be showing you how to paint the Ghar Outcast Rebels from the Gates of Antares game using the Army Painter range of paints to do so. Before we can begin painting, the first step is to prime the miniature, and for this I've used a black spray primer. As there are a lot of black areas on the miniature, it makes the most sense to use this colour of primer. The first area I'll be tackling on this miniature will be the black areas, and I want to give them a slightly purple hint, and for this I'll be highlighting the edges using Alen Purple. The black areas on this miniature are numerous and include the helmet, the arms, the legs, and also some areas of the weapon as well. When highlighting these areas, I'd recommend using a thin brush with just a small amount of paint on the tip of that brush and lightly drag it across the edges. In this next step, I'll be continuing the highlights on the black areas. This time, however, I'll be using Oozing Purple. This time around, instead of highlighting all of the edges, I'll instead just be focusing on some of the upper edges and sharper corners of the miniature. This will just enhance the detailing and create the effect that light is bouncing off these areas. In this next step, I'll now be painting the scales on the miniature, and for this I'll be starting off with a base coat of Angel Green. Now, as with all of the base coats on this miniature, I would recommend creating a mixture of 1 part paint to 1 part water. Applying this layer, let it dry thoroughly, and then apply a second layer over the top. This will give you the best coverage possible. With the base coat completed, we now want to start picking out the individual scales using Mouldy Clothes. To make this step easier, I would recommend using a small brush with just a small amount of thinned down paint on the tip of that brush, as this will give you much better control in picking out some of these small scales. The final step in painting the scales is to highlight them using Jungle Green. As before, make sure you use a small brush to really pick out some of those small scales, and this time you just want to apply a very small amount of Jungle Green to the edges of these scales. The next area of this miniature that I'll be painting will be the exposed skin. This includes the exposed skin on the face and also the hands. I'll be painting all of these areas, first of all, with a base coat of Corpse Pale. As this is such a light paint, it may be tricky to apply it over the dark primer we used at the beginning of this tutorial. So I would recommend creating a mixture of 1 part paint to 1 part water and applying several coats until you get a nice and even coverage across the flesh areas. With the base coat achieved, the next step is to wash over the flesh using Flesh Wash. This wash will pull into the recesses and really help to bring out the detailing in these areas, as well as darkening the colours slightly as well. The final step in painting the skin is to highlight it using Mummy Robes. Now we want to focus our highlight on some of the raised areas such as the knuckles and also some of the raised facial features as well. The next area of our miniature that we'll be painting will be the leather areas. This includes the cloak and also the leather straps holding the helmet on, and we want to base coat all of these areas using Leather Brown. In this next step, I'll now be washing over the areas we painted in the previous step using Strong Tone ink. This wash will pull into the recesses, really bring out the detail and also darken down the colour of the fabric as well, which will really help to enhance our future highlights. The final step in painting our brown leather areas is to highlight them using Monster Brown. Now, as with our previous highlights, I'll be focusing this around the edges of the cloth and also around some of the holes as well. This will not only serve to enhance some of the details, but will also give the effect that the cloth has been worn over time as well. The next task in painting our Ghar Outcast Rebel is to tackle the red areas of the miniature, and for this I'm going to be starting off with a base coat of Crusted Sore. These areas not only include the spider legs on the back, but also the raised panels of the weapon and the lenses in the helmet as well. Once we have achieved a nice and even base coat of Crusted Sore, the next step is to apply a highlight of Dragon Red. For the weapon, I'll be focusing the Dragon Red along the edges of the red panels. However, when I come to paint the spider legs on the back, I want to focus around the joints themselves, and using a watered down mix, steadily blend them into the darker sections of the legs. To finish off painting the red areas, I now want to apply an extreme highlight of Lava Orange. For the armor panels, we just want to focus a small dot onto the corners, but for the spider legs, we just want to focus this just around the joints themselves. The next area of our Ghar Outcast Rebel I'll be painting will be the plasma glow emanating from the weapon. Now for this, we want to start off with a base coat of Warlock Purple, and we want to apply several thin down coats as before to ensure we get the best coverage possible. With the base coat completed, we now want to apply a layer of Pixie Pink. I'm going to be focusing this around the centre of the plasma glow themselves, but also along the edges of the container that holds it. This will give us a glowing effect. Before we move on to finishing off the plasma glow, we first want to apply a base coat of Spaceship Exterior to any of the white armor panels on the miniature. The final step in painting our Ghar Outcast Rebel is to tackle the white areas. This includes the edges of the armor panels and also the center of the plasma glow on the weapon as well. When tackling the plasma glow, I would highly recommend creating a mixture of 1 part paint to 1 part water, as this will give you a more natural transition between the white and the pink. And here we have the completed Ghar Outcast Rebel, who you can see I've also based. Now whilst I've focused this tutorial on a member of the Rebel command team, you could apply the exact same colours and techniques used in this video to any of the Ghar Outcast Rebels. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please do let me know in the comments below, and also subscribe to be kept up to date with all of my future videos. To be kept up to date with all the projects that I'm currently working on, you should definitely check out both my Facebook and Instagram profiles, which you can find links to in the description below. And finally, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. It's your support that makes these videos possible. If you are also interested in supporting me, you can do so by checking out my Patreon page, which you can find a link to in the description below. From there you can donate to me from as little as $1 a month, which will just really help me in producing future videos. So all that's left to say is, thanks for watching and goodbye.